to get to concerning resting on or remembering the Sabbath day. We really want to get to a couple of those slides, and then we're going to jump into a whole new section, in fact, because right now we're talking about protecting God's honor, and we've covered all of these things. So you shall have no other gods before me. What do we talk about there? Does anybody remember, by way of kind of review, what do we talk about having no other gods before me, and kind of some of the application of that? Does anybody remember? Going back a little ways? I mean, obviously, we're not going to have, like, idols, okay? But what else? Okay? Because that would really be talking about the carved images. But no other gods before me. What does that mean? Right? That's right. Yes, that's right. Yes. So things, we're not going to make anything else into a god. We're not forming, but nothing else is going to take the place of God in our life. And again, we're not going to say that, God is our everything. It's not that He's one of many. He is our everything. All right. So you should not make make for yourself a carved image. We talked about that. Remember, we're not in the business of making those images, and we're not in the business of worshiping those images, right? So it's not just the making or worshiping. It's both. I don't make those things, and I don't worship those things, all right? And we talked about something like the Sistine Chapel, right? We don't want to have anything that represents God the Father, because He said, listen, I don't look like anything, and anytime you represent me, you're always going to degrade me. It's going to be less than what I actually am, all right? You shall not take the name of the Lord your God, the name of the Lord your God in vain. So we talked a lot about there, just talking about speech. Our speech should be appropriate in all ways, and what we're saying represents God because we're ambassadors for God. Remember the Sabbath day, which is what we're talking about here. Skip on down. You should not bear false witness. Remember, we talked at length, and for a long time, we talked about lying, right? Bearing false witness is lying, saying something that's not true. Remember that God never wants us to lie. He always wants us to tell the truth, okay? In all circumstances, in all ways, tell the truth. And then we're going back one and talking about the Sabbath day and the ramifications for that. So, is it wise to have regular days of rest from our ordinary work? Is it wise? Yes or no? Should we work every single day is the question. Should we work every day? Why is it wise? And why is it a wise thing for us to have days of rest, Marv?
Because we're made that way.
That's right. Yes, we. Amen. That's right. Yep. That's right. Science could talk about this, but God's Word already said this, right? Because when we have the commandment to do work and then rest, God is saying there is a need for you to do rest, to have time, yes, for your physical sense, but more importantly for spiritual sense, to have time to truly focus on God. I mean, because people that work 7 days a week and they make worship work out somehow, they're able to get to church services. Man, that's a tough week, and they're probably up against the wall. They don't really have a lot of choice to do that or not. But how hard would it be? Because I don't know a lot of you that work 7 days a week all the time. How hard would it be for you to come to church on Sunday and be totally focused on what was going on? If you have worked the day before, you're going to be working the day of, and you're going to be working the next day, right? It'd be really hard to come and worship God with your whole heart and your whole mind. I know, thank you, okay? So it would be really difficult, okay? All right, so I don't know what happened there. Just shh. Let's see. Okay, I don't know. We should recognize the wisdom in regular rest today, right? So that's it was an Old Testament commandment given by God, one that we don't follow. We don't have a Sabbath day's rest, okay? But it should be the case that we have regular rest. There is wisdom in that we can follow on till today. We can have regular rest today. That should be something that we participate in our lives. Now, what is the standard for that? Is there a biblical command? How much rest? How little rest? Right. No. Okay. So that leads me to the question, why a 40-hour work week? This is related, but the question, why the 40-hour work week? Okay. All right, good. Yeah, okay. All right. I mean, is there a biblical mandate for a 40-hour work week is what I'm saying? Is there a biblical mandate, right? Okay. Is there a biblical mandate for a 30-hour work week, 20-hour work week, right? So on and so forth. Okay, you see what I'm saying here? So when we think about the 40-hour work week, that was invented by somebody. Somebody made that. Okay, so I want you to take it for what it's worth. Either way, so you say, well, I regularly work 60 hours. Okay. I regularly work 30 hours. Should the person that works 60 hours feel like they are better than somebody who works 30 hours? Okay. Oh, what's that?
Maybe at their job.
Maybe at their. I don't know. I mean, what if you're just a manual laborer that lays bricks? They'll probably be really good, I guess, at their job. I'm just trying to think of something that's kind of like a very mundane task. All right? If you're just doing that task over and over again, you can be an excellent person at that task, but you're still working 60 hours a week. Okay? So my point is this. We sometimes think about, well, this person works this much, and therefore they're a worker. And someone works this much, and so they're a very hard worker. Well, if someone's a very hard worker because they work 60 hours a week, what do you call somebody who works 30 hours a week? That's right. Right? We would say, because of this arbitrary standard of 40 hours in our week, right? That's an arbitrary standard, right? If someone is working 30 hours a week or less, we say, well, they're slacking off. But what if they're making more than the person that works 60 hours a week? Right? Are they working harder? Or smarter? That's right. Yeah, right. Okay. So just take that. I just like us to think about, we think about 40-hour work weeks because we're talking about, work 6 days and have a day off or whatever the case might be. That was the Sabbath commandment, right? But what did the work day for them look like? We don't have to get into that necessarily. But we don't have to put ourselves into a box to just think about, well, it has to be 40 hours or it's not a work week. Well, that's not true. That's right. Yes. Yeah. You're working on your house, working on things inside that. Yeah. That's right. Yes. Matt.
I know this is your point, but I'll just restate it.
Sure.
It goes back to what is the core of our ethics. Sometimes we'll develop our ethics based on, looks like according to ChatGPT, Henry Ford decided in
That's right. Yes. Yes.
And so then we develop, oh yeah, that's our ethical standard.
That's right.
Better than someone who works 30, but
That's
we're talking about ethics from a biblical perspective.
That's exactly right. Yes. Thank you. That's hitting the nail on the head. Exactly, right? When we're thinking about biblical ethics, we can't say someone is not doing, what God wants. Because there's lots of passages we'll talk about here in a second about what God says about working, okay? Well, if someone's working, they're working. They might not be working 40 hours a week, but they're working, okay? All right. So, even Jesus became weak from time to time and needed rest, John 14:6. So that just proves that, Jesus was not ashamed or afraid of working, but also needed times for rest and recuperation, as do we. Okay, he came in the form of man, and he needed rest. And so God is thus pleased with our work, and God is pleased with our rest. Sometimes we have a hard time with that. I don't know if there's anybody here, but there are people that are workaholics, and they just love to work all the time. And part of that drive for working so much comes from their thought process that God wants me to work all the time. Well, that's true. God desires that we do work and we provide for our families and the benefits that comes from work and the good that comes from working. But God also is pleased when we rest too. Did you know that? That God's pleased when we rest. Okay, yes. Marv?
Some people can't sit alone with themselves.
Yeah.
And just quietly.
That's right, yeah.
They have to constantly be moving.
That's a deeper problem. I mean, that's an issue that's probably outside of the realm of ethics and maybe more in the realm of psychology, right? Like, they're struggling internally.
It's like a motivator for them.
That's true.
They're not sitting with themselves.
Yeah. So we can honor God in how we work, and we can also honor God in how we rest. And what's a way in which how can we honor God in how we rest? How can we honor God in how we rest? Okay, yes, okay, that's the type of rest maybe we do, right? Okay, but how can we honor God in how that rest transpires?
Not simple ways.
Okay, that's it. Yep, non-sinful ways. And so not doing this, and what's the positive? When we rest, I think it's a good example, talking to members, that travel. And on vacation, they find a place to worship, right? We just talk to you guys tonight, right? Multiple people. And I'm talking to a lot of people that do that anyway, right? So even in our rest, we're still wanting to be with God's people, right? So that's the proper way. That's a way that we're honoring God even while we're resting. I'm on vacation, so I'm on vacation from everything, including going to be with God's people. Well, that's not honoring God, and that doesn't honor God in how we rest in that way, in that capacity. So regular work is a blessing. Exodus chapter 20 and verse 9 says, 6 days you shall labor, right? So he says, listen, that's the time that I've given you to work, and you're going to work those days. That work for you is a blessing. He doesn't give a 40-hour work week. He just says 6 days you're going to labor, okay? How long are those days? Does anybody know how long that work day is? No, right? He just says those days you're going to wake up, you're going to accomplish something, and then you're going to do it over the next day, and the next day, and the next day. It's not just a commandment about rest in Exodus chapter 20 and verse 9. It's not just a commandment about rest. It's also a commandment about work. Genesis chapter 1 and verse 28 tells us told Adam and Eve to fill the earth and subdue it. In Genesis chapter 2 and verse 15, in the Garden of Eden, work it and keep it. Right? So in the garden, man from the very beginning was doing what? Work. Right? Work. There was an element of work. Even in the garden, man worked. So we've talked a lot about this, but what's the definition, or what's your definition of work? How would you define work? How would you define work?
Completing productive tasks.
Okay, completing productive tasks. Okay, good. What's ChatGPT say, Matt? No, okay. So,
That helps you in the future.
something that helps you in the future. Okay, yep. That's laborious. No, I don't know what it's. Labor intensive. Okay, all right. So, like, if somebody that's just typing on the computer, does that work still? Okay. What if I'm trying to think about like laid back, chill jobs that you're not doing a lot, but you still would be working. I mean, there are people that they hold a sign by the road because the local law doesn't allow that sign just to be there, so they have to stand by the sign. That they're working too, right? They just sit there. They're working. They get paid hourly just to sit by the sign. So anyways, so I want us to kind of think about this idea of what work is, this big picture of work, all right? And then think about what happens when we get to heaven. So Revelation chapter 7 and verse 15 says, they serve him day and night in his temple. Is serving work? Yeah. Don't be afraid. That's okay. Is serving work? Sure. Who here has ever been a server? Okay, yeah, all right. Server, yeah, serving is work. Serving is work. Revelation chapter 22 and verse 3. His servants will serve him. Worship, service, active, ongoing. Revelation chapter 5 and verse 9 and 10. We will reign with him, kings and priests. Both of these are active roles, right? We don't just have a crown on our head. We're not just a priest. We are these active roles there in the heavenly realm. And even Luke chapter 19, verses 17 through 19 talks about the faithful stewardship that leads to greater responsibility, not retirement. All right, so you have several passages. When we get to heaven, we will be working. Again, it's not, if we think about the definition of work, it doesn't mean that we're doing something. Who here, raise your hand if you love your job. Raise my hand. I love what I do for, man, there's like no hands up. Okay, yeah. All right, I love what I do. And most times what I'm doing doesn't feel like work. I'm doing things that I love to do all the time. Now, there are elements of it that are definitely work. If we're with our Savior and our God, and we're there and we're serving, the things we're doing might be work, but will it feel like work? No, right? So, but can work still be work even if it doesn't feel like work? Yes. right? So we can be in heaven working even if it doesn't feel like work, right? All right, so, including that service that goes toward God. So in Exodus chapter 20, that commandment, which is about the Sabbath and about the rest that comes from that, the work and the rest that goes along with this, this is all, that element is reaffirmed in the New Testament in that regular work is a blessing, right? So that aspect of the commandment, we're not keeping the Sabbath, but regular work is reaffirmed in the New Testament. Look at 2 Thessalonians chapter 3 and verse 10. 2 Thessalonians 3 and verse 10. Second Thessalonians 3 and verse 10 says, For even when we were with you, we used to give you this order. If anyone is not willing to work, then he is not to eat either. Imagine how our country would change. I don't want to spend too much time here. Imagine how our country would change if this commandment was followed. Right? Think about all the jobs that could be done by people that say they can't do anything. Right? And so work should be done by us. All right? We'll talk a little bit more about maybe people who can't do work in future lessons in our next section. Paul gave this example to be imitated. If you look verse 8 and 9, Paul says, Nor did we eat anyone's bread without paying for it, but with labor and hardship we kept working night and day so that we would not be a burden to any of you. Not because we do not have the right to this, right? He says we're doing preaching and ministry. We have the right to be not recompensed, to be compensated. There you go. Compensated for our work. We have the right to be compensated for our work, but in order to offer ourselves as a model for you so that you would follow our example, he says. So look, hey, we're doing this free of charge, pro bono, right? We want to do this. We realize how good this work is to do. We're going to do it. All right? We're going to be an example to you so that you will go out and teach and preach others as well, and not have to worry about asking to be supported by the church there. So Paul gives this example about how this work is a blessing. Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 28. Turn back there. Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 28. Ephesians 4 in verse 28 says, He who steals must steal no longer, but rather he must labor, performing with his own hands what is good, so that he will have something to share with one who has need. Look at the blessing that comes from work, from labor. I have something, and I have something to share and something to give because of the regular work that I'm engaged in. All right, and again, 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 11 and 12 talks about working with your hands. All right, so the whole commandment in Exodus chapter 20 is not reaffirmed in the New Testament. There's no reaffirmation of keeping the Sabbath, but there is an element of continuing to work. That is reaffirmed in the New Testament. 6 days of work in the Old Testament, it says, and continuing to work in the New Testament as well. So we have a duty and an ethic then to continue to be people who are always working. And that means that we work in this life, and we will work in the life to come. We worked in the garden, and we'll work all throughout the rest of the time that we're here and on to the next life. All right, any questions before we move on in the last 12 minutes? That's pretty wild. Okay, I didn't expect that to take that long, but you got a new sheet in front of you, and so we'll get through some of that tonight. So we're switching gears now, and we're going to be talking about, I meant to delete that, but that's okay. Protecting human authority. So the protecting human authority would just be honor your father and your mother, right? That's the commandment we're keeping. Honor your father and your mother. I was meant to delete it there, so that's okay. So here's the questions we're going to be talking about this week and next, Lord willing. So here's the questions. Why does God want children to honor their parents? Should adult children continue to be obedient to their parents? Is spanking wrong? What are the advantages of public schools, Christian schools, and homeschooling? So here's two passages that talk about this. Exodus chapter 20 and verse 12, honor your father and your mother is the commandment from the Ten Commandments, and then restated in Deuteronomy, it gives a reasoning that it may go well with you. in Deuteronomy chapter 5 and verse 16. So what does this commandment mean? Well, we can kind of give an overview of kind of where we've gone so far, and we can see that the first 4 commandments deal with our relationship with God, and the last 6 deal with human relationships. So the first 4 deal with our relationship with God, all right? So we've talked about things like no carved images, no other gods before me, the Sabbath day. Those are relationships with God, but then the last 6 deal with these human relationships. The first of these relational commands involves the parents. How interesting. We begin in these relationships, and the very first one we talk about when it comes to relationships is our parents. Okay? So if children truly honor their parents, they will learn from them how to live all of life in obedience to God and will know His blessing on their lives, as a father explains to his son in Proverbs chapter 3. In Proverbs 3 verses 1 and 2 simply tells his son in the Proverbs, he says in chapter 3 and verse 1, "My son, do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments. For length of days and years of life and peace they will add to you." Now again, a proverb is a proverb is a proverb, right? So you say, well, listen, I'm doing all these things and something doesn't happen. Well, remember, it's a proverb, right? Train up a child in the way he should go, he won't depart from it. Well, what if you do train up your child and he does depart from it? Remember, a proverb is a proverb is a proverb, okay? Because not always you do everything according to what the proverb says. Well, generally speaking, keeping the proverb is what happens, all right, the outcome. All right, so to treat with respect, deference, and care. That's the meaning of honor, right? So honoring, there's some false ideas about honoring. Sometimes people think honoring means, doing everything the person says, bending over backwards for them, making your life revolve around them. That's not what honor means. That's not what God's talking about when God says to honor your parents. Honoring your parents means treating them with respect, deference. So again, there's this idea of a default preference for them. If you're in a room of many people, you would prefer to do something for them versus other people because that's the way you would honor them among other people. And then caring for them. We'll talk about that in our next lesson or 2. But caring for them as well. So there is an element of obedience that's included in this commandment. It is to honor. There is an element of obedience. Deuteronomy chapter 21. Let's turn there. This is pretty wild. Deuteronomy 21. All right, Deuteronomy 21, 18 through 21. "If any man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey his father or his mother, and when they chastise him, he will not even listen to them, then his father and mother shall seize him and bring him out to the elders of the city at the gateway of his hometown. They shall say to the elders of his city, 'This son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey us. He is a glutton and a drunkard.' Then all the men of the city shall stone him to death. So you shall remove the evil from your midst, and all Israel will hear of it and fear." Verse 22 says, "If a man has committed a sin worthy of death, and he's put to death, and you hang him on a tree, his corpse shall not hang all night on the tree, but you shall surely bury him on the same day, so you won't defile your land." All right, think about that. Think about the severity of this. But I also want to clarify some things here. What do we know about this son? Give me some feedback from the text. What do we know about this son? Both by what the text says and by inference.
It's not just that he sinned.
Okay, it's not just that he sinned. What is it? It's well beyond that, right? It's this ongoing defiance. Okay, good. Yes? What else do we know about this son?
Gluttonous.
Okay, yeah, gluttonous and what does it say? Gluttonous and a drunkard, right? Okay, so are we talking about a small child then when we talk about this? No. We're talking about somebody who is engaging in what the world likes to call adult activities, okay? All right, so he's got his own free will. Notice something about what it talks about the city that this individual lives in. Again, kind of giving further credence to the idea that he's older. What does it say about the city? What pronoun is used? his. It's his, right? It doesn't say our or your. It says his hometown, right? So you go to his hometown, and the elders of his city at the gateway of his hometown, verse 19 says, right? So again, he's older individual living on his own, all right? So does this context or does this text prove that children should continue to be obedient to their parents even outside the home? If yes, then how? If you're making the argument that they have to be obedient to their parents, in living a righteous life, very good, yes, okay. How else is this child to be obedient to his parents under whose roof he doesn't live anymore? In what ways? Because I think it's a little subtle here, but it's not saying that this child has to do everything that mom and dad says. What is it saying that this child needs to do or is failing to do? Respect. Respect? Okay, so how is he bringing disrespect upon his parents?
Once they're instructed.
That's right, yes, by the way he's living. Yes, Matt?
Because ignoring parental discipline.
Okay, yes.
They've instructed and disciplined him for something or told him about something he's doing wrong, and then he's stubborn.
That's right, yes. So they're giving him wise, righteous instruction. He's living a sinful life, which anybody of the town would have recognized, but the family being the closest knows the intricacies of this, and the family has gone back to him multiple times trying to, because it says, verse 18, if any man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey, right? So this has happened multiple times. This is not just a single time. And it says, he goes on to say, when they chastise him, he will not even listen. Right, so this is not they're going on beating him or spanking him. They're saying, listen, you're living a wrong life. You're living a life of error, and we're trying to help you, and you're not listening to us. What's the consequence for that son? Do the elders get to stone him? Or excuse me, do the parents get to stone him to death? No. They're brought to the elders of that city, and the elders have to make the righteous decision, which says, listen, if you continue living, what's going to happen by your influence? What's going to happen by your influence in this city if you're allowed to continue to live? Others are going to follow, and it's going to reflect poorly on your parents. Exactly, yes. So what do we do when a single individual living a stubborn, rebellious life can influence so many people for negative? What do we do with that person? Stone them. Yeah. I mean, it's a clear-cut example of how an individual can negatively impact a society, and instead of just allowing that person to live and continue and say, just don't pay attention to old Uncle Jimmy, no, you stone him. You get rid of that person so that that person doesn't negatively influence the people around. Right? That's what happens. And what part do the parents have to play in this? They're the ones that deal with him first and repeatedly, and they're the ones that say, seize him and bring him to the elders. Okay, there's a lot of responsibility on the parents. They have some part to play in this because he's rebellious and stubborn in some ways, maybe in part by them. Okay, yes, Marv? I wonder, yeah, I don't know the old law that well, so I wonder how much could fall upon their shoulders, right? And surely, let's just say this, surely societally, they're not going to be looked on upon favorably if their son or their child was so rebellious that he was stoned by the people of that city. I'm sure there will be people that are going to say, wow, you really did a number on your son to allow him to do this, right? So I'm sure it would look negative on them. Okay. All right. So Proverbs 20:20, he who curses his father or his mother, talks about how negative that is. Let's see here. I put the first part of the verse here. But Proverbs 20:20, he who curses his father or his mother, his lamp will go out in the time of darkness. In Proverbs 30 and verse 17, the eye that mocks a father and scorns a mother, the ravens of the valley will pick it out, and the young eagles will eat it. All right. Do we see this like high regard for honoring parents and the certainty of the things that are going to happen to them if they don't honor parents? Exodus chapter 21, verses 15 through 17 speaks about what happens when you strike a father. Go back to Exodus chapter 21. Just after the giving of the Ten Commandments, Moses continues in giving the law. In verse 15, he says, he who strikes his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. Verse 16 says, he who kidnaps a man, whether he sells him or he is found in possession, shall surely be put to death. Verse 17, he who curses his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. So striking or cursing his father, be put to death. And Leviticus chapter 20, verse 9 says the same thing. The question I want to ask as we kind of think about concluding, what makes honor so challenging as a child first? What makes honoring your parents so challenging as a child? Think back 50, 60 years ago when you guys were kids. They don't know what they're talking about, okay. What's that?
They're human and will make mistakes.
Yeah.
And you're the one to see it.
Yeah, and we see those human mistakes, yeah. We're living through that right now, right? Waylon and Wesley's little beady eyes are watching us as we make our mistakes, you know. And they see us, and we're like, man, you know, we made a mistake. And I say, I'm sorry, you know, but they watch that. They see it, right? And so I'm sure that the honor, you know, it's easy to honor when they're real little and mom and dad can't do any wrong, you know. But when they get older, they see the things you do wrong, and they say, wow, man, you guys are a piece of work, all right? So what makes honor so challenging as an adult with your parents? It's different, isn't it?
I think it's not their business, that it's your business, not their business.
Okay, so you're saying from the child's perspective, right? Okay, so it's not their business to
I'm grown, you can't tell me what to do.
Okay, good, right? Okay, and in some ways that's true, but you know, but if the parents trying to help you, right? They're trying to instruct you, trying to continue to provide wisdom to you, that you should have a listening ear, right? Yes.
Including myself, and there's still a lot of them know. They don't know what they don't know.
Yes, right.
And so, you know, and if you tell them something, sometimes they can actually think, oh, that would never happen to me.
Absolutely. Yep, that's right. Very good. Well, I appreciate you guys staying after a little bit. I just want to finish that last question, and we'll jump back in next week, Lord willing. Thank you.